Hello, and welcome to another episode of Breaking This Down, the podcast where we break down growth strategies to help entrepreneurs from around the world grow their businesses. Starting a business is one of the hardest things that anybody can do, and asking for little help never hurt anybody. Today, we're getting a helping hand from our friends over at Gorgias with Nicole. In our conversation, Nicole breaks down a ton of cool tips and tricks. We go through specific case studies, we understand how Gorgias fundamentally changes the way that e-commerce businesses view their customers, and ultimately how successful merchants grow their business through exceptional customer service. If you make it to the end, Nicole and I have a little surprise for everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for listening. So, thank you, Nicole, for joining us. We're excited to have you. I wanted to start off a little bit more casual before we dive into our topic for today, primarily being around the fundamentals of a successful e-commerce experience. I wanted to ask for our listeners, who's Nicole? What do we need to know? Give us a little bit of a background here.
Yeah, so thanks, Marco, for having me. Super excited to be here. So a little bit of context about me is, I grew up internationally, I think I was just telling you, and always had a love for bringing people together, meeting new people. And then that kind of translated into the brand world where I generally was attracted to jobs that allowed me to interface with a lot of different people. And so prior to actually my job at Gorgias, I was at a startup that was reimagining the mini bar and gift shop at hotels. And basically, I built like a brand network there where I was bringing brands into hotels. COVID hit, so that kind of didn't end up working out. But then after that, I asked my network and I was like, where should I work? And they recommended Gorgias and said a lot of these brands were kind of moving on to this software ecosystem, and e-commerce was taking like a huge spike. So then I was kind of like, this sounds like a good opportunity, and decided to actually follow that. And that's how I ended up here and leading business development for the East Coast now for Gorgias.
Very exciting. Now, most people will already know what Gorgias is. They really have to be living under a rock to not know what you guys do, but give us a really quick elevator pitch for those that don't know.
Yeah, so Gorgias, again, for context, e-commerce had a huge boom this last year. And I think what we found was there were different ways to interact with individuals and brands because you couldn't do that in-person experience. So Q Gorgias, which is an e-commerce help desk, it allows you to aggregate all your support in one place. So email, chat, Facebook, phone, Instagram, all those customer service touch points that you're probably either missing or you're not taking full advantage of, or really creating this customer journey online. And, rather than a brand going to Facebook and responding and then going to check their Shopify order in Shopify and do that separately, we created a tool that aggregates it all in one place. There's machine learning components, AI components to help respond to those repetitive inquiries and make it a really smarter way to level up your operational team.
Very exciting. Can you give us a couple of examples as to who you work with?
Yes. I mean, what's really great is, part of knowing all these different brands is I actually shop from them. I have zero shame in going into a store and being like, this is a cool brand. Let me DM the founder, or let me tweet at them or something like that. Like I really just love getting to know their stories. So some of my favorite brands, one we just recently onboarded was Ilia Beauty. I use their products every single day. And so it was really cool to work with a brand like that who's pioneering in the clean beauty industry. Another brand that we just onboarded, which I think I'm allowed to say now, is Netflix. So that's super exciting. So we're going to be managing Netflix customer support through our software. And then also we have some other celebrity brands as well that are pretty cool to be working with and to be, on their website and look at it and be like, oh, that's our Gorgias tool. And, we were able to bring that in. But yeah, I would say Ilia Beauty, Supergoop, another sunscreen. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Princess Polly. I would say I shop at majority of the brands that we onboard. And for context, we grew from 2,000 last year to 7,000 now. And it's really not good for my shopping habits, but it's fun to work with those brands.
It sounds really dangerous to be working for Gorgias and getting an inside track to all of these businesses and then spending money on them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm doing.
Out of curiosity, the Netflix side of things, are you doing all of their customer support, or is it mainly they just launched their apparel site, right? Or
it would be their e-commerce store. Yeah. I don't know if we could handle that. That customer. Actually, I wonder if Netflix gets a lot of customer support. I don't know.
I don't know. Actually, they have pretty good service. I don't think you really need to complain.
It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, I've never really had an issue with them.
Exactly. It works when you need it. Speaking of Netflix launching a e-commerce experience and e-commerce brand, it seems like, especially like you just said, throughout the pandemic, more and more people realized, one, as I shut down, I can't really sell to people in person. And, e-commerce was blowing up a little bit more. And there's, especially in the last, 12 to 16 months, we've noticed that there's been a big boom in new businesses launching, and a lot of them trying to tap their way through an e-commerce experience. In your mind, what would you consider are some of the fundamentals of a successful e-commerce experience for someone?
Yeah. So I would say, always put yourself in the customer's shoes. I know that's always very straightforward, but when it comes to customer service, it's so important. There's numerous times I've had terrible customer experience and I won't purchase from the merchant again. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And so when you think about a really great customer service experience, like I like using the Zappos example. I think this was many, many years ago. Zappos used to, if you asked about a specific shoe, they would send you to a different website, even if it wasn't their own. And that just creates a really great brand affinity with the brand. It puts a positive tone in your mouth. And, I think when it comes to being able to change the customer's experience, it's so true with customer service. You could turn any negative experience into a positive one. If you have a negative one and it keeps being negative, it's kind of game over. But if you want to have that retention, you want to have those customers converting, I think the core of it is putting yourself in the customer's shoes and figuring out what would I as a customer want, and what would be good service to me. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to hire, a fleet of like 20 customer service agents. You can leverage tools like Gorgias, for example, to actually automate those repetitive tasks. So it's easy to find information. It's easy to figure out where your order is. You don't have to respond to every "where is my order" inquiry, which is the number one most asked for inquiry, but finding ways to make it easy for the customer to actually find those answers themselves, which I think we'll get into like a self-service conversation next. But I think it's really important to put yourself in the customer's shoes and figure out, what would I like? And then another part of that is just being, proactive. If you're just solely trying to get customers on your website, getting them to convert, they're not going to be lifelong customers. You have to think about the entire customer journey and how to actually get them back as a customer. So maybe it's being on different channels, not just email and phone, figuring out how to be on different channels where the modern consumer now sits. And then, yeah, I would say those are kind of like the core functionalities of making sure that you have a good team set up. Use automations. Everyone always says, "Oh, like I don't want to automate. Like it sounds like it's gonna be a robot." But we've made a tool that allows you to pull in and say, like, "Hey, Marco, here's your order update," and pull in all the variables, pull in the tracking link with the click of a button, or with the click of just setting up an automation, which is basically a pre-canned response that executes a response to the customer without based on a specific formula. That's pretty much what our team sets up. But I think those are ways to actually make your life easier and make automation your friend versus feeling like it's this really scary term and it's gonna, take over humanity or something.
If we believe Elon Musk, that's a possibility. But
Yeah.
the first thing that you mentioned that really caught my eye there is we work with a business that produces dress shirts for men, and they have what I find the most satisfactory customer support in the world. Before they even became a client, there's a success story that hit me that sort of resonated with when you were just talking about. There was a wedding happening in London, and they were providing the shirts for all the groomsmen and that side of the family. And they had accidentally sent a couple of wrong shirts, and the wedding was happening outside of London. It wasn't going to get near there, and so the groom calls and says, "Hey, you guys sent me the wrong shirt." And they're like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry." And what they did was they went to the store, picked up that CS person, went to the store, picked up that shirt, put it in a cab, and sent it all the way up outside of London, which cost almost £600 at the time for a shirt that's $19. But that doing that, you have a customer for life, because they're always going to
Wow.
the day. Yeah, I think that
That is
is,
crazy.
especially in shirts, for example. There's a million shirt manufacturers out there. You can buy them from H&M or whatever it is, and some are cheaper and more expensive. And I think that that's one of the big differentiators. And they're doing 250 million a year in the US alone. So it's crazy numbers just by putting your customer first, really.
Yeah, that's really insane. I think, I actually haven't heard of a customer experience like that. I'm definitely going to be using that in some future conversations and be like, I talked to this guy, Marco, and he told me this story. But I think that hits on a lot of points, right? It's like, one, you're putting yourself in the customer's shoes. Two, you're being extremely personable. And I think, you can do personalization while still being really efficient online now. You can mimic what it's like to be in person, even though, with COVID, everyone has kind of been working from home, ordering online, there's minimal like customer interaction. But I think that's such a great story that Like you said, that's a lifelong customer. And to have that sort of impact where you're continuously telling story, that's marketing of its own, right? If you're going to have marketing that works, you might as well create and build a story and a lasting story at that as well.
Exactly. And I think the thing that you mentioned there is a lot of this, in this case, it's a little bit different because, you have a time crunch, but getting the shirt to the wedding in time. But for a lot of the general inquiries that you get, they're not all going to be that extreme, and they can be automated and sound human, right? That's kind of the beauty of the Gorgias tool, where someone can ask a question and there's going to be a lot of frequently asked questions that a lot of the e-commerce companies are going to have set up. And Gorgias makes it really easy for you to, automate those responses so that you don't have to get bogged down, for lack of a better way of phrasing that, in general inquiries that, a robot can answer, but focus on those crazy stories like the one that we just talked about.
Yeah, that's nuts.
On that note, I've been a little curious about specifically diving into the tool Gorgias. We often think of customer success as dealing with angry clients, right, or customers. Whereas I think Gorgias flips that on its head a little bit. And I'd love to hear from you, how does Gorgias specifically help businesses and customer success teams address those points that you just mentioned? So for example, the automation, putting yourself in the customer's shoes. What are some of those issues that you've come across?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be proactive. I think people always used to view customer service as this reactive issue, tickets that you just want to get through. But there's so much more you can do with it. I think one of the best practices that I always talk about is social media. There's oftentimes, like I mentioned, IDM founders or IDM brands, or you're responding to a social media inquiry and you have no context of who that customer is. We're actually able to see on our end if you're writing in on Instagram and you have a Shopify account and it's associated with the same email, that we can see your order history just from that social media interaction. So if you're commenting, "Oh, I love this," and you're tagging 10 of your friends, we can actually identify that that's a positive sentiment, put that into a category. And then now the customer service agent is going to be like, I'm going to get through all these positive comments and I'm going to upsell them. And I'm going to say, and really treat your success team like your sales team and be like, okay, this is already a previous customer. How about I give him a discount? And now while I'm also giving him a discount, I'm giving all his 10 friends a discount. And that's like the beauty of upselling and being proactive with customer service and making sure that you're not just focusing on being this reactive, oh, they already purchased, they're kind of like not a customer I want to focus on, but actually focusing on those really loyal customers and figuring out ways I can make your experience even better post-purchase. Another thing I like to talk about is we spend so much money on ad spend, right? And oftentimes there's a miss in communication where you'll launch an ad, you'll swipe up, right? Now, and that's great. I think that's traditionally how most of the brands do it. But I think we take that one step further at Gorgias and we're like, well, why don't you swipe the ad into a conversation? A Facebook ad into a Facebook Messenger conversation or into a WhatsApp flow or into, a chat, really guide them throughout that customer journey. Because if you're holding their hand every step of the way, they're more likely to convert, right? Because there's all these signs, you're talking to someone, you're asking them about sizing, you feel like someone is there with you and you're not waiting around. And if you were waiting around, you probably might leave that website, or if someone wasn't being responsive, you probably wouldn't focus on that specific purchase. But if you can find ways to really open up those conversations and treat them like your friend, like they're purchasing from a friend and they build trust in the brand, most likely they will come back. We actually found that the conversion rate when you respond within 10 minutes on chat was 30%. And then when it was a response under 2 minutes, it was 50%. So almost came 50% higher. And we actually have revenue metrics that track how many individuals are converting based on these customer service inquiries. So we have an entire reporting dashboard to actually put profits and revenue, according to these different success agents.
I am Alexandria, Director of Customer Experience for Princess Polly. I'm focused on our strategy and innovation in the CX department here at Princess Polly. I have a quote, and I always tell our CX leaders that customer experience is the heart of an organization, and we pump the blood and deliver the oxygen to the vital organs in the business to help them thrive and grow stronger. The Gorgias platform allows our agents a seamless place to just do it all. We are really there for the customer every step of the way if they want. Our customers expect quality and efficiency where they are. So the real question is, how do you get quality and efficiency across every single platform? And then once you have it, how do you maintain it? And I believe that with the Gorgias platform, we can do that. If you're interested in learning more about Gorgias, go to gorgias.com and mention podcast for 2 months free.
I love that because there's an example that I like this is a client of ours, before we even pitched him, I was curious in his product. He basically sells leggings for men, or what he calls meggings. And he is a Gorgias user as well. And before I ever even pitched them, or before we ever even got them as a client, we had sent them a message. And I got an instant reply, not knowing that that was automated at the time. But it seemed like a real human that was doing it. And this was in the early stages of his business when he didn't have, a CS team, and he was still, as the lone founder, handling all of it. And through that process, I realized I ended up buying something, even though we weren't going to do business with him at that time. But just because it seemed like he was so on his, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, shit, right? And everything was in line, and he had instantly gotten back to me. It made me feel like there was a real person there. It's a real business that I can trust, especially if you're going towards, towards a new brand that you might not have previously heard of. And that idea at Gorgias, turning customer support into a profit center, to me it's flipping the whole narrative, which I really enjoy. Going from, this is a tedious task of I have to deal with angry customers, to this can actually be fun, and I can use all this information, this data that you just mentioned, looking at the Shopify history, to actually get my friends to then buy a pair of meggings as well, and different things like that. So I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at customer support. And I think it's one thing that definitely puts Gorgias aside from everybody else.
Yeah, and I think like I said, there's a power of communication. Like, it's better to over communicate than under communicate. I mean, obviously you don't want to spam them, right? But you've already got the customer, right? They're coming to you. It's more of an inbound tool. And how can you really use that inbound tool to just focus on conversion rates? And sometimes I would say, I think we had a study once that showed it was like the equivalent of a 5% increase in ad spend, just by responding to specific comments. And you'd be surprised how many brands don't even respond to their comments, and they're just focusing on the email comments, or they're not active on different channels.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of the times when we do reviews for potential clients, or for clients that are recently onboarded, we see that most of the time their comments just go unanswered. And the beauty of that is they're asking questions that others are asking as well. So if you answer it one, there's going to be a lift in people purchasing coming from that. And it's not just dealing with people that have previously shopped from you, but it's also addressing those that are going to be shopping from you.
Totally. Yeah.
Speaking of those that might be shopping from you, a big part of, customer service and customer success is the self-serve portion that we were sort of alluding to a little bit earlier. In your time at Gorgias, and maybe as a person shopping at a lot of these brands, how have you found the importance of the self-service platforms? And if there's specific tips that you would have in terms of setting it up for someone, are there specific, it should be used as a frequently asked question portal? Walk me through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so self-service is interesting. So we recently launched self-service, and that was really important for us because a lot of the times now, I like to think about my mom. My mom likes to call brands. She doesn't know how to handle like text message or chat or emails even sometimes. She's very, focused on those channels. Now, for myself and, my friends, we're kind of the modern consumer that likes to text, or we like to chat, or if I don't need to talk to anyone, I'm totally fine finding the answer myself if I can figure that out in a quick and efficient way. So what we launched was a self-service chat, and that's finding ways to answer your own questions and the most commonly asked questions as well. So, for example, where is my order? If you're going to the website and you type in your email and write where is my order, then you can actually track it with a specific button that'll actually elicit a button for you to actually look at your order, what you last ordered. And I think that's really important because there's this shift in the consumer now that actually, they want to engage with you, but then there's also this idea of like making it really easy for the customer so that you actually can cut out the middleman in some capacity and, work harder or work smarter, not necessarily harder, by having this self-service tool for a lot of these brands that might realize like, oh, my customer is actually this under this bucket and wants to find the answers themselves. Maybe they want to look in the FAQ section, or maybe they just want to write, hey, like, and ask a question, and then it automates a response to that. People want quick and efficient communication. And so that's kind of what we talk about with self-serve, is finding ways to actually make it really easy for the customer themselves to answer their own problems.
Do you have an example of a brand that you think does a really good job at that you can share?
Yeah, I would say like Steve Madden has a pretty great self-service chat. I think they're one of our most unique or biggest customers, and they've done a lot of different adjustments to like their chat and to their, flows. So I would say they have a great job, and I can't think of it right now, but if I think of it, I can send you guys or send you the link and you can include it.
Cool. Thank you. On that line, I wanted to talk a little bit about, at the beginning, we talked about the fundamentals of a e-commerce experience being, personalization. and things like that. Is that a part of the self-service platform, or is it primarily just answering a question for someone?
I would say all of it is e-commerce based. I think Gorgias, started because the founders saw there were some incumbents in the space that were mainly B2B focused. There was no one really in the e-commerce space. And then no one was really focusing on like the Shopify piece of it. And so we really came in and we're like, well, these are the most commonly asked questions. Online shopping is at an all-time high. And we're able to kind of build this product around this e-commerce experience. And we really pride ourselves as calling ourselves the help desk for e-commerce. So I would say almost everything, when we're creating automations, when we're picking sentiments, and sentiments are like the tone of the message. Intents are going to be, what is the intention of the customer? We've created like specific sentiments and specific intents to identify what is the customer asking about based on key trigger words. So, a brand can easily just have it set up by our team. And it'll be like anytime a customer writes the word ugly, that'll be a negative sentiment, right? For example, so you can create a rule that buckets all these negative comments into one view, and you can go ahead and hide those comments. So a lot of it is based on e-commerce, but also like the modern day consumer and what their language is using it in the most commonly used language.
That sounds like it saves a lot of time. Having to go in there and hide comments or reply to those things is going to be quite painful.
Yes, exactly. It definitely saves a lot of time. And I think, when you start off with a company, I talk to founders all the time that are sole founders, and they're like, I use Gorgias because it saves me time. And then there's those founders that are like, oh, I don't need to outsource it yet or use a tool yet. And I'm like, no, but like it actually should be the opposite, because for you, it's more valuable for your time that you shouldn't be focusing on that. You should be focusing on other parts of operating the business and allow a tool to help do a lot of the bulk work.
Yeah, you get a lot of the time back that you can focus on other things, such as maybe growth of the company or fulfillment. We're all struggling with supply chain issues, right? So all that makes sense.
Exactly.
Cool. I think we have an example of Steve Madden if somebody wants to check out a self-service portal. When it comes to customer feedback and customer success, a lot of the questions that we get from founders is, how do I get feedback from my customer? What do I need to know? Whether not the public facing stuff that they put on an ad or, they send you an email about, but whether a little bit more product specific where I'm seeking information from them. Gorgias does a really incredible job at this. And I'd be curious to hear, what are some of the best practices there in your experience? And how does that really help a founder grow their business?
So feedback is really interesting. I know we talked about the tools, but like a Yotpo or a Kendo example, those are partners of ours and their review platforms. I think there's so much you can find in those reviews. Maybe there's a new flavor, right? So we had this we had this candle company, and they had this lavender candle. And, the amount of times rose was actually asked for, was almost higher than the lavender request. So what they did is they used that feedback and actually turned it into a new product line. So they were able to double down on sales. They were able to create a 2-pack between lavender and rose, trying to upsell the customer with not just one product, but 2 products. I think reviews are really great because nowadays I don't buy anything, especially not clothing, unless I know how it fits. If I check what the measurements are on the model, I check what the reviews say. And if the reviews are like a 3 out of 5, I'm like, oh no, I'm not buying this. And I think, again, we're in this economy where people want the best deal. They're looking on multiple websites. They're looking on the other reviews before they make a purchase. So I think, if you can understand what those reviews are and really put data to those reviews and to those comments, you can actually figure out ways to better your product offering, to understand what your customers are saying, and being proactive. For example, there was like you said, it's supply chain issues, or there's a huge product outage, and I forget which brand did this, but basically they already knew, okay, there's a product outage. We're going to get tons of emails, manufacturing outage. We're going to get tons of emails about our brand not being shipped on time, et cetera. So instead, they proactively emailed all the customers. They were like, we're so sorry. There's already a delay. Expect it in 1 to 2 weeks. There's nothing you need to do on your end other than know that it's coming. If you'd like to cancel, here's X, Y, and Z. Gave them all the options. And I think that's really important, because if someone wrote they didn't even communicate when the product was coming, terrible review of the brand, that can really hurt your brand image. So if you can be proactive, you can really mitigate a lot of those terrible reviews and maybe turn it into a positive one. And I actually know this brand for a fact had a review that said that was like they were so proactive about communication when they had an outage, and really left like a 5-star stellar review. So I think there's just so much you can do from a review standpoint and using that data to your advantage as well.
Yeah, so tie that into the ads, we often see that if we're trying to convince someone to buy, apparel, for example, using any of that user-generated content or reviews really has a huge impact on getting someone to buy. I know for myself, I can absolutely relate to what you just said. As a fat guy, it's really hard to find jeans that fit well. And so I always look for, on tag pictures on Instagram to see, okay, is there a bigger dude that's, wearing these, and do I look like an absolute buffoon or like tree trunk pants? So I can absolutely relate to that. And you see that, tools like Gorgias make it easy to control some of that and what's out there about you, especially capturing that feedback through your integrations and your partners through Akendo and Yotpo, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How important would you say, or how do you see people using, it's a bit of a dumb question, but in terms of use cases, how do you see more and more people, or how do you see people changing the way that they deal with customer success as they onboard with Gorgias?
I think if you're ready to take the move and implement a tool like this, I think you just shift your mindset of customer service, because, Klaviyo is such a core tool. You need something for marketing, but now customer service is becoming this, not only marketing tool, this retention tool, and really like this integral part of your tech stack. So I think that's when you start to realize, if I can optimize this, I can create more revenue. If I can create a great customer experience, I'm going to be a better brand and I'm fostering community through social media. I think, we oftentimes talk about how being on social media, and, we just launched Twitter, for example, and creating this community brand for yourself is so important, because it creates, the word of mouth, the ripple effect of word of mouth. It also creates this great brand affinity. It creates really happy customers. And oftentimes, if you're not thinking about those things, you might be missing a huge opportunity for your brand. Now, if you are thinking about those things, I think that's when, and you're implementing something like Gorgias, you're realizing, wow, there's so much power in this tool. They shift their focus on how to double down on a tool like ours versus trying to like manually do it themselves.
Yeah. I think we often get asked, why should I use a tool like that? And obviously, one of the easiest answers for us, since we primarily focus on paid marketing, is, you get time back. You don't sit there for hours answering the same customer support message over and over again. You have basically what is another human being, but it's a tool that actually answers those questions for you. And that time is then, something you can spend on what would be more valuable to your business.
I would also say with that, time back is super important, but another piece is you're really understanding your customer. Like, your success team probably knows your customer better than the founder if you're really doing it right, and that customer service team has to communicate and escalate. Hey, this is what we're seeing. This is, they find things before, some of the key stakeholders even know. And I think that's really important, because there's so much information there. And another piece of that is testing out different channels. Like I mentioned, this omni-channel experience, knowing where your customers sit. If you're ready to implement a tool, you want to know about your customers. You want to know if they're on their SMS texters, or you want to know if they're on Facebook or Instagram. Like, you're really ready to get to know your customer and double down on how to make it a really successful revenue driving channel.
Yeah, I love that you just said, your CS or your CX person usually knows before the founder what are some of the problems, what are people saying. There's an example that I love where we have weekly meetings with the founder, and he spends a lot of time going through the ads with us. And so we go through performance, and I then had a conversation with one of the CX person when I was visiting their office, and the CX person listed like 10 things that were important that the founder had no idea about. We put those in an ad, and for that Black Friday, they 4x'd just because we started using that language that people were talking about. We 4x'd the actual revenue from taking CX into consideration. So I love that, that's a good point.
We should get a case study going on that.
We should. They're a really cool brand.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it.
When we recommend Gorgias to one of our clients, it's the saving time aspect and everything else. But one thing that really, at least we see, seals the deal for them is they've usually, I'll give you an example. We have a client who does, in his spare time when he doesn't have work to do, he sometimes pops into CX and CS and looks at what people are talking about. And he tends to go after the Karens of the world, right? He gets a little bit feisty and replies to them in a way that's probably not the best way, especially as a founder. It's really hurting his business. But what we started talking about with him is, he has this idea that CX is always dealing with problems. But in the case of when we started talking to him about using Gorgias, what really resonated with him was it's not just dealing with problems. It's actually, one, turning those problems into more money, into revenue, and being sort of upfront about what they can expect. It's not just about fixing problems, but it's about turning customer support into a profit center. And I think that language really resonates with a lot of people. And if there's specifics that you can talk to about how, Gorgias, the app, does that, that would be super helpful. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that 28%, you saw an increase in 28% conversion rate for people that before they were buying, when they needed a question answered via SMS or through the web chat.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier is we saw 30% convert, or almost 30%, or 28% was the accurate number, with a response time of under 10 minutes. And that's for customers who haven't purchased within 30 days or are entirely new customers. And kind of what I was alluding to with that revenue metric is putting metrics to your sales team, figuring out ways to actually upsell, putting, KPIs to your success team so that they actually know how to benchmark it and how you can constantly improve. Because I think, like I said, there's so much value in responding to your customer quickly and while still remaining personalized. And I think those are kind of the two key ways to really do that and turn your customer service center into a profit center.
I love that. That's a really, that language to me always resonates with people. Every time we talk about customer support and we mention Gorgias and we say, turn what is a crappy job into something that makes you more money, to put it bluntly, they're always like, okay, talk to me more, tell me more. And then that gets them. Versus a lot of other people just say, volume of tickets and things like that. I think that what the brand stands for is really what sets it apart from a lot of others.
Totally. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys referring, and we also have a discount for anyone on listening to the podcast. It's always the second and third month free. They just have to say that they heard about it from, the Blank Studio podcast.
We'll put the link in the description if there is a specific link for them.
Perfect.
Sweet. A lot of what we've covered today has been about how to create a fundamental, e-commerce experience and making the e-commerce experience more enjoyable. I mean, we've both given personal examples, me, fat man, trying to buy jeans, you talking about going through all of the different examples, looking at customer reviews. You really do your digging before you actually buy from a brand, especially in e-commerce. And that's really important. And, to summarize almost, it seems like one of the big fundamentals here is really creating an experience that people would like, right? It's not necessarily for the generation like your mother, where you said where she likes to pick up a phone and talk to someone. It's much more, can I answer the question myself? Can I get the answer in a record number of time? And is there a real person that I can talk to, whether a bot or, something that you can automate? And I think that that's what people often overlook in terms of creating a really good experience in e-commerce, because it's not in a store where you walk in and you have a sales associate. It's about putting that sales associate in front of someone. And I think that Gorgias as a tool itself can really help people create that experience and really push more sales, drive more traffic, and ultimately provide an experience where you're not just looking at the one-time purchase of that buyer, right? It's not Nicole buying a candle once, it's Nicole buying a candle from that brand consistent because you had a great experience. And it's a lifetime value of the customer that really pushes the business and helps the business grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summarized it perfectly.
To close this out a little bit, is there anything specific that you wanted to talk about? If not, I'll ask just a couple of closing questions. Do you think I feel like we missed something that we should really put in as well?
No, I think kind of just to summarize, like, the most important thing is, automation is your friend. Put yourself in the customer's shoes, upsell where you can with your success team, and, always remain personalized and go above. You can turn any negative experience into a positive one. I think those are kind of like the key takeaways. And if you can build strategy around that, and, every brand is totally different. Some brands have, more strict customer service policies, some don't. If you can be as clear as possible, because the last thing you want to do is create that negative customer experience where they're like, I don't even want to purchase from this merchant again.
Yeah. I love the idea of turning a negative into a positive, especially with that example that you mentioned where, they knew they were going to have outages and they just were proactive about it. If I got that email, I know I would be, really loyal to that brand because they were ahead of the game. They sort of focused on everything. They gave me options if I wanted to cancel. They didn't just keep my money and sort of gouge me for it. That's a great example there.
Yeah. And I think, like, I always like to compare it to eating at a restaurant. You eat at a restaurant, terrible service, right? Or sorry, terrible food, but the service is amazing, right? That can totally change your entire experience. If you have amazing service, you might end up tipping better. You might be like, I'm going to give it one more chance. I think that's always speaks louder than, maybe you have great food and terrible service, and you're kind of like, you know what, the service was so bad, I don't know if I'm going to give this another shot. But there's always ways that server can really change your experience. And I think that's goes the same thing for online.
Totally agree. To close this out, we always ask all of our guests one specific questions around, are there any books that you'd recommend for someone to read, whether around CS, whether in business, whether in personal life? It can be something as stupid as, it can be something as random that has nothing to do with e-commerce. Is there something that you'd recommend or something that you've read recently that caught your eye?
Oh man, putting me on the spot. I have been, I haven't read too many personal books. I read a lot of like fiction. I read a really crazy book called Verity, which was just totally blew my mind. All my girlfriends read it. But I think one that always stuck with me was The Art of Not Giving an F. And that one I think was just really great for personal development, also leading a team and trying not to care so much about what others think. And, I think it's inherent in our culture, but I think in order to be successful at business, you kind of have to disrupt it a little bit, not do what everyone else is doing, and really kind of follow your gut. And I think that was kind of, I read that actually only this past year, even though everyone had read it like many years ago. But yeah, those two, if you like fiction, I would highly recommend Verity. It's like a love story, but also really like a huge thriller at the same time. And then, The Art of Not Giving. I feel like so bad for saying the word.
It's called The Art of Not
I
Giving
can't say
a
it.
yes.
Yeah, giving an
Yes.
F.
It's actually a book that a lot of people have been recommending. Seems like it's making the rounds again. In closing, what's one key takeaway that you would want someone to take away from listening to this?
Not to sound too salesy, but I would always say take a call and learn about the tool before you make decisions. I think oftentimes we see, oh, well, we're not interested. And it's like, but you don't even know what we have to offer. You don't even know how we can make your life easier. I think that's the beauty of these tools. I know there's a lot out there, but it never hurts to take a call. And if you're not interested, then you're not interested. But I think that is the first step to really understanding, oh, maybe this could impact your entire strategy in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Be open to taking that call. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It was lovely to learn from you today.
Thank you, Marco.
And if you want to find Nicole or Gorgias anywhere, there'll be links in the description for you all to check it out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marco.
Bye.